Hello, and welcome to Independent Agents Talk Shop. I'm your host, Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA. Today's episode is Successfully Navigating from Captive Agency to Independent Agency. I'd like to introduce my guest, Keenan Rice, owner of Eclipse Insurance based in DuQuoin, Illinois.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, Keenan.
Wonderful to be here.
Thanks. Ken Schaub, owner of Firehouse Insurance in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Ken. And Tom Barrett, president of SIAA Mid-America.
Good morning, listeners.
Thanks for joining us, Tom. So, folks, if you would like to learn more about Eclipse Insurance, please visit them on Facebook. And if you'd like to learn more about Firehouse Insurance, please visit their website at firehouseins.com. Tom Barrett, of course, is with SIAA and can be found at siaa.net. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm informing our listeners that both agencies are members of SIAA. Oh, and in case you're wondering, SIAA stands for Strategic Insurance Agency Alliance. This episode of Insurance Agents Talk Shop focuses on agents who have transitioned or are making the transition to an independent agency subsequent to being an exclusive or captive agent. There's a great deal of disruption in the insurance industry today in terms of activity on the part of captive agents seeking out opportunities to become independent agents. And I'd like Tom Barrett to provide us with an overview of these two forms of agency ownership and operations. Tom, could you do that for us?
Absolutely, Doug. Thank you for that. Just to frame this, it's interesting that in SIA's history, we've helped navigate 4,500 times the exclusive agent to the independent agency channel. And if you look at the current year, we're about 48% of our new members are coming from the exclusive agency channel. One of the reasons that we think this is important to distinguish between the two is because in the exclusive channel, many times it's more of a passive marketing effort, support of almost a $6 billion budget for advertising, which basically is driving prospects to their door and to their phones. Got Main Street accessibility, a high transaction focused agency, typically no sales process, but more of a transactional process. And when you look at it, it's a high quote activity, but it's a lower revenue level, and it tends to be a more inefficient and expensive way to run a business. Where the independent agency model is more of the agency being able to choose their prospects, to be able to choose the audience that they want to work with. And then once they've identified that audience, they aggressively go after them with a very laser focused marketing plan. We typically measure policies per account. We typically look at revenue per account. And so as we look at the independent agency model, they typically have higher commission per account. They typically have more lines of coverage per account. The average commission per account is higher. The equity value is typically higher. And this is an agency that has the ability, because of their focused effort and because they're looking at 4 to 7 policies per account, by combining their personal lines, their small business life insurance, and all their insurance needs, they're a more efficient and a more profitable agency. And I think this is one of the things that's driving that ability to not only leverage relationships, but also to maximize the revenue per relationships with multiple lines of coverage, including both the small business coverage and the personal lines. And those are the big differences between exclusive and independent, Doug.
So Tom, so that being the case, does that help us to understand, and maybe you can provide us with an overview about what's going on or what's happening in the world of exclusive agents today?
Well, part of the problem in the exclusive world is the pressure on commissions. And, the average agency, if you just look at the overhead of an independent agency or a captive agency, it takes about 11.5 to 12% commission to keep your door open and make a bit of profit. And still, unless you get a profit sharing check at the end of the year, that's pretty much a break-even business. And so when the captive agency companies start reducing or putting pressure on commissions, basically that agency is working for, a very lean means of making a living. They're also having appetite changes, which forces them to either look at other lines of coverage or other prospects in their community versus being able to choose the folks they have a relationship with. So we're seeing a lot of pressure on the part of the exclusive and captive agency channels with reduced commissions, tightening appetite guides, rate increases so they're not competitive. And if you've only got one option, you've got one place to go and one source, and that's just very limiting when you're trying to make a living and build a business.
Sure. That and obviously that's understandable, I think, by everyone. So now that we have an overview of the forms of ownership, captive versus independent, and understanding the current climate in the exclusive agent world, I'd like to turn to Keenan first and ask the question: what drove you to start an independent agency, and why did you take the captive route in the first place?
Well, in a short answer, why I'm an independent agent, we have an independent agency, is my wife. But backing up before that, I was with, I don't even know if I can say the name of the company, so I won't, a captive company that's very dominant in the state of Illinois for 12 years. In DuQuoin, and my wife was an agent with the same company for about 3 years in a town, about 25, 30 minutes away in Murfreesboro. As we were, after getting married, having children, expanding, we wanted to work together, and it just so happened that the company that I had represented for 12 and her for 3 years was unwilling to work with us in any way to achieve that goal of working together. And so Janice Dunphy, who is with VIAA at the time, had been by my office 4 or 5 years previous. And I just picked a card up out of my office drawer, and I told my wife I'm going to call, and if she doesn't call back, we'll go looking somewhere else. But she immediately called back, set up a time to come meet with us, talk to us about the process. And, kind of, I guess you'd say the rest is history. But the odd thing was, I looked on the card. It had a listing of all of the largest aggregators or the largest alliances that there were in the country. And I attempted to reach out to every single one of those, and not one of them would call me back or even talk to me. But Janice, just within minutes, returned my call, was willing to set up an appointment, sat down and talked to us. We went in and met with Henry and Elizabeth and the team in St. Louis, and they rolled out the red carpet, and they have been a wonderful, wonderful help in us getting rolling and starting our independent agency. When I started in the captive business, I grew up on a dairy farm, and my family was well versed in this insurance company due to their relationship with the Farm Bureau in Illinois. And we got out of the dairy business, and I had to have a job. So it was just kind of the perfect thing. You got a farm kid, he's going to go to work for this insurance company. I really enjoyed it. I loved my time there, but the sky was not the limit in the captive role. In the independent agency, we're truly finding out now that the sky is the limit. And the captive agent in the captive world, there are kingmakers, those managers and those executives. They decide who and who isn't successful from a standpoint of, we're going to give you this when you start. And that was one of the things. There was very little when I started, and seeing all the new agents come on and be handed much, much larger assignments made their incomes much, much larger than mine. Meanwhile, I'd been winning the awards. I'd been going on the trips. I was a leader in the agency. And it's just kind of that feeling of being snubbed, along with my wife's pushing and saying we need to do business in a different manner. And that's why we made the change. And I guess you'd say the rest is history. And in my opinion, even though I wasn't gung ho about it as she was, just through the grace of God, stumbling across VIAA and Janice Dunphy and my wife's pushing, we've created what we feel is something pretty darn special. And I really don't know what the limits are, and the partnership with VIAA and SIAA has just been outstanding, and it's been an outstanding partnership for us. And I don't know. I mean, I got nothing but good things to say, but I do tell people all the time, this isn't for the faint of heart. If you're just wanting to sign business in the easy road, you better look somewhere else. But if you truly want to build something of value and grow personally and professionally, there's no better way to do it than this. So.
That's great. That's good to hear. A couple of quick comments, if I may. The first is I'm glad that you've had a good experience coming on board as part of the alliance. And the other thing is that you illustrate here, I think that we come into these types of conversations expecting that there's one reason and one reason only that, or two reasons maybe, that captive agents want to become independent agents. And you certainly have shown that for whatever reason, even working together with your spouse, that may be a good reason to go independent. So
well, it helped us. It helped, I guess, us use our strengths better. We have different strengths and different weaknesses, and she takes care of my weaknesses, and and kind of vice versa. We play off each other's strengths, and we can really build something that like I said, the sky's the limit here. It
Great.
really truly is. And there was a lot of different reasons that we came to this decision, but whatever those reasons are, I thank God we're here, because I think it's a great opportunity for us. And I threw out, after about the first year, any expectation or any thoughts I had of what it was going to be like, or what it might be like, or where we were going, because at this point I'm just throwing it out the window and saying, my God, if we got 20 locations in 5 years, I'm not going to be surprised.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's just wonderful the things you can do and the ways that you can grow as an independent agency that just aren't
Awesome.
out there as a captive.
Gotcha. All right. And thank you for sharing that with us, Keenan. That's actually insightful. And I'm going to turn now to Ken. And Ken, your situation, as I perceive it's a little bit different in that you've been an independent agent for less than a year, if I understand that correctly,
Yep.
and that you've actually been performing quite well in that time, despite the turmoil that's been happening this past year. Can you tell us a bit about your path to independence and perhaps those areas you deem as critical to your initial success?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, too, if we could maybe have pushed it back a little bit farther from April, maybe we would have. It just, we were all signed and everything as the world was collapsing in April, and it kind of just happened that way. But, we've stayed on our feet, so that's super important, like you mentioned. And for me, it was, I was at a captive. I also won't disclose the name just yet. And about 4.5 years ago, and I didn't really expect to be in the insurance game long. And I actually gave them a shot because I interned with them in college for about 1.5 years. And so as I was graduating, they offered me full time. And I was like, I think it's fair to, give them a year and give them a shot. And I really, my background's in finance. I have a degree in finance. So I really didn't have any expectation in the insurance game at all. And then after a couple of years, I met some other, few good people who I ended up getting really close with, and we all didn't, mind selling insurance, and we grew to like it more and more, and we kind of all banded together one day, and we're like, hey, if we're gonna, stay in this long term, we should probably, leave and make something for ourselves with this. We're all young, we have time to really set that foundation. So I think the time is now, and that's how it, all kind of came about, and some careful planning and months of research later, we all decided on SIAA, and I think that was the first area critical to the initial success. And then it was just keeping momentum, not slowing down or stopping just because the virus is here, and finding different ways to prospect and get our name out there, and things like that. And then we also really leaned into the internet side of things.
And when you say into the internet side of things, do you mind maybe describing that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's really everything. We're talking, website, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, pretty much all of the platforms. Like even TikTok, most people think that it's just a bunch of kids on there, but it's really the kids' parents that are on TikTok right now. So, it's staying up with those different things, and just making sure you're staying with the times and just being everywhere. Somebody has their platform of choice, so it's kind of just hitting the one that they're hitting on.
Oh, so I have to ask, you don't have to answer. Do you mind sharing your age with the listeners?
Actually, yeah, yesterday, or the 28th, was my 26th birthday.
Well, happy birthday. Yeah. And I will say this, there's another, if you will, offshoot of conversation, not just about captive agents joining the IA channel, but also the need to have younger agents join the IA channel. Just you're serving here as an example of both, it seems, which is unexpected but good. So
yeah,
it's good to hear that. All right, so I'm going to shift now, and Keenan, I'm going to look back at you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you don't currently have an agency website. Is that true?
Well, we own a domain, but we do not have a website. No.
Okay, so as you may or may not know, I'm a marketing professional, right? So I see that as a whole in your marketing and communication strategy, but you're doing quite well, and you were even awarded the honor of Agent of the Year by the Big I in your first year of operation. So, is this something that not having a website, is this something based on, or is this based on something you learned while you were a captive agent, or what's the deal there with no website?
Well, I think it goes back to, and I understand Ken's that I think he said Cincinnati, so he's in the big city experience. I'm from a small rural area, you know. I don't have millions of people around me, but I know thousands upon thousands of people. And in a big city, I did spend some time in my younger years living in Nashville, Tennessee. I was around millions of people, but didn't know very many. You know, you don't even get to know your neighbors when you live in a city. I live in a small town, about 6,000 people, and we're about an hour and a half from St. Louis. That's our closest big city. But I can go to a restaurant pre-COVID, obviously, and feel comfortable sitting down at 5 or 6 different tables with people that I've known my whole life. So it's the whole, they know me, I hope they like me, and I think they trust me. So moving that relationship to the next level of insurance is obvious. We don't, at this point, we haven't maximized the opportunity of the people that we know yet. So why would we go after business that, in my opinion, is not as sticky as is the business that where we know people, they like us, they trust us, they want to do business with us. You know, we just have to give them a reason, whether through better coverage or through the same or better coverage with better premiums, or more of a consultative, trusted advisor type role that brings them to the table. I am not discounting technology. I am not discounting any of those social media applications that Ken mentioned. I don't want anybody to hear that's what I'm saying. I think those are additional revenues and additional lines of business that can be taken advantage of and that can be turned into dollars. I just feel like, for me personally, I have yet to even maximize the personal relationships I have. And we'll get into this later, a little bit of how we've grown, but we're trying to replicate, essentially, we're trying to replicate the captive experience to the independent agency world. And part of the captive experience is a hometown, local, trusted advisor. Where I see a lot of independent agents, it's not always the person-to-person role, though it is sometimes. They are way ahead of the game when it comes to captive versus independent on the technology side with the agency Zoom. And my wife handles all of those type things with the agency Zoom and the management systems and that. But the captive people they're more of the small town agency people. They know the people, they trust the people, they got their boots on the ground, they're knocking on doors, they're handing out awards to baseball teams, basketball teams. I'm trying to maintain that relationship with all of our customers and still going to grasp some of that additional business from other areas, whether it be online, whether it be through social media or whatever, to really maximize our growth. I'll tell a funny story about the type of relationships I have with my customers. When I was a captive agent for 12 years, I was happy. I was content, But I remember I had a person that was going to cancel some business one time, and she called me in tears. She was upset that she was canceling her business because she was saving so much money going somewhere else. She felt very, very bad about leaving me because we had worked together so long. But, she was pregnant too, so there could have been some additional emotions in there. I don't know. But those are the type of deep relationships we have where people don't want to leave us, And that is how we've grown the business without a website. Not saying that's bad, not saying we can't grow and that we aren't doing some business from those formats, but we really focus on Facebook as far as more than a website. We focus on Facebook. We do a lot of cool things, a lot of contests on Facebook. We try to keep our content constant and fresh so that other people can find us and come to us through that route. And I just don't see the value, if we're not taking payments online at this point in our agency, of having a website when you're going to get the most clicks out of Facebook as opposed to somebody going to Safari on their phone and, typing in www.eclipseinsure.com. And
Gotcha.
So that's why even without a website, we've had that growth. And, but, I would say if you talk to me in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to do a lot more stuff online with social media, etc. It's
Right.
just right now, not even 2 years in, or, that's where we're at. So
Okay.
hope
All
that
right.
helps.
Well, it's a different take on it. And I'd like actually for Tom Barrett to kind of weigh in on this, because Tom's been in the industry for a little while. Tom, I just would be interested in getting your take on Keenan's approach here.
Well, it's a fresh and different look. I certainly respect that, and I grew up in a small town, and so I do understand that the typical independent agent, your brand is your name. I mean, it's the name on the door, it's your reputation in your community, and when you look at the independent agency model, it's all about being a citizen in your community. And another thing that is different between the two is because of the advertising and the drive to drive people into the office or through the phones, the captive agency typically sits in their office most days, where the independent agency is out in their community. And they start early with breakfast with folks that gather at the local restaurants. They then move to the business owners as they open their shops at 9 o'clock and cruise Main Street. And then in the afternoons and evenings, they're meeting with families around kitchen tables to talk about, personal risk management programs and insurance programs. And so this is a little bit different. I certainly think in a small town, Facebook is a real good avenue because that's where a lot of your older people are, the more mature people, and obviously they have more money to spend and have more assets to insure typically. But it's also what I've seen is the difference here in that, in a small community, when you're dealing with families and individuals, it's a relationship-driven transaction. And once you get that relationship, not only do you want to maximize the revenue per account, which is important. So you're looking at life insurance, you're looking at small business if they own one, insuring all their personal lines at one stop. But you're also looking for who they know. And so it's a big referral source. And when you're dealing with a tight group of people and there's that relationship, they're more trusting and more open to give you referrals. And, so the independent agency and community is built on referrals and reputation. And that's what I see when I see this model is that it's not that it's not involving technology, but he's using Facebook as his primary avenue. And I think that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that is what we do. We kind of not that there isn't value in a website and we won't use one day, but Facebook is pretty well our website. That's the piece where somebody can go and find out about us. They can watch videos. They can see the locations. They can keep up just on the little stuff. We try to keep it constant, try to keep it fresh so somebody can always check in. We do a lot of cool different contests and stuff, but it's a way for them to look into our business and say, hey, what are these people like? Because we have the live videos. They see our kids. They see us. They see the people that work for us. And, that's been a huge part of it for us. We just use Facebook instead of a website, and I guess that's kind of really sums it up, just like Tom said.
Okay. So
Doug, another thing I'll mention here too, and this is the beauty of the independent agent is each one of these gentlemen get to choose what they want to do. It's their choice. It's not the company's choice. The company's not dictating who their customer is going to be or what class of business or what socioeconomic world they're going to live in. They get to choose what they do. And that's the beauty of this business model is they're different. Each one are right. It's their business. They do it the way they want. And they're both very, very successful in two different sort of ways, but because they have choice. And I think that's the biggest issue with being independent. You get to choose the companies you work with, you get to choose the people you insure, and you get to choose your lifestyle. And I think that's really neat.
Yep. And that's it's an excellent point, Tom. So let me just switch back then if I can, because there is obviously a whole nother perspective on this. And I'm thinking, Ken, that you talked about leaning into the internet and your use of a number of social media channels. And I've noticed also that your agency has a professional mobile website. What would you say, or how would you comment on how these online channels and the website have contributed, or how important they've been to your first year as an independent agent? And are these areas you utilized when you were a captive agent as well?
So that's actually a good question. So I'll start off with the latter one with the captive. And funny enough, with how much we're on there now, I really didn't do much social media as a captive. And I think there was just a couple reasons for that. Just being able to not have the like they give you leads, they give you sources that are kind of handed in, you don't really have to go and kill all of your business and stuff like that. So in that sense, I think that's why we really didn't lean into it on the captive side. But as far as the independent success, kind of to Keenan's point, like being in the bigger city, like, I did grow up here, but at the same time, like I don't know that many people. Like I know some, and that's nice, but also being younger, I just really haven't, been around and made a ton of relationships yet. So I think that being on all the platforms, it just kind of plasters us everywhere. So like people who aren't familiar with us, and we do brand it as a Cincinnati like local independent. So like when we advertise for that, people can click to our website, Facebook, see that we are legitimate. I think that being in the city, there is a part of legitimacy, to where like if I go and find somebody who's advertising for something, and I go and look at their stuff and they don't have a website, I probably won't do business with that person, not even in insurance, just in anything. So I think that that's definitely a good point, to Keenan's like mindset versus city versus if you're more of a rural area. So I think that there is value in that, but for our success, it has been very important. There's a lot of conversations that can be brought up as well, like, oh hey, I saw this or this on your Facebook or your website or your LinkedIn or whatever it is. So um, definitely very important for us.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and I follow that, and it's interesting, and I guess my slanted perspective has always been what you mentioned, Ken, which is that if you don't have a website, you're not legitimate. In other words, in terms of the perspective of the prospective customer or prospective client, and so, but Keenan has shown, hey, there's a different approach to this, and one that works very well for him. So it is interesting to see both perspectives, and I do want to ask one quick question, just a yes or no. Do either of you have a mobile app for your agency?
We do not.
All right, so that's a no for Keenan. Ken, what did you say?
No, we do not have a mobile app. I've looked into it actually, and I know that there's one in connection with SIA. I actually have it downloaded here. It's just the one with the eye on it. But honestly, I just haven't had much time to dive into that. And then also, we've been pushing people to that website that is like the more mobile version, so you can kind of scroll it on your phone.
Sure. Okay. So one of the reasons why I've kind of brought that up, and one of the reasons why I think it's very, if you will, pointed at this point in time, is that with COVID, et cetera, and we know it's going to be around for another probably 6 months before there's a vaccine widely available, that some people are going to certainly have a predilection to not come in contact with you physically, right? So I just look at that as one more option if you do engage in technology, specifically in terms of servicing your existing clients. So just a mention and an offshoot, and I'd like to turn away from that if we could, and I'm just going to ask you both to dig in a little and tell our listeners a couple of your most frustrating factors of being a captive agent. And then, because we know it's not without its challenges, talk about some of the frustrating factors of being an independent agent now that you can compare the two. So Keenan, why don't you start us off with that?
Well, you gave us kind of the outline, and I just wrote 3 things down, and I won't expand on them too much, but I guess the first and the biggest thing that I had to adjust to when I became an independent agent is you almost feel like you're on an island. There are some contacts we made, but in that captive world, there were so many agents, way too many agents probably for the company I represented. And you felt, you could call the guy in town because you're not in competition with the other guy in town. You can't take his accounts, he can't take yours, so they're always willing to help. And there was that camaraderie that fell within the company, and you had your meetings, you got together. So that was a much different feel than I'm on an island, I'm all alone, I'm trying to call somebody 3 hours away because I've talked to them a couple times and asked for help. But so that was a difference for me that's kind of been frustrating. But the longer you're in the independent world, the more connections you make, and less that feels like it. But you really have to seek out those relationships. That's the first thing. Second thing, the company that I represented has been number 1 for claims every freaking year in Illinois forever. And so the claims experience for me has been very different. In all honesty, I've had to be more involved in the claims process now as an independent agent than I ever had to before. Before, it was call it in and forget about it. You never thought about it again. You hardly got involved. I find myself being involved more frequently now than before. We are making higher commissions, so in my mind, that's part of it. The other thing is the good side of that. People see the value as you, and I noticed this on a big claim I worked. They were not as happy as they could have been with the company that they were insured with, but somebody came to me and said, hey, so and so was mentioning how you went over and above and out of your way to make sure they were taken care of in every way possible. And so I was able to build rapport with that client because of my involvement in that process. And they, for whatever reason, truly saw me as the hero in the situation. Where when a captive agent, that's why those people think, well, no matter who the agent is, they can come and go. The company's the company and I'm staying with the company. That's not the case in the independent. People really value the person, the individual agent, as opposed to the company. And that's, again, those big differences. The third thing, I don't think Ken has got into it yet, but he's going to find out this spring, is rewrites. We hired a young lady to work for us about 10 months in that came from another independent agency. And when these annual renewals started to hit, I said, holy cow, what's going on here? I said, how are all these things popping up that the increases are so large? Because we tracked it with our management system, anything over 10%. And she just looked at me. She said, well, isn't that normal? And I said, no, I've never seen anything like this. What's going on with these increases? Because when you're a captive agent, the increases happen. There's nothing you can do. It's kind of like, well, I'm not lowering your liability and I'm not cutting your coverage. So do you want to do something with the deductible? And there was no time and energy spent on rewriting or reshopping business. So the rewriting, the reshopping of business gives you a lot. That's a whole nother, I guess you'd say, job that has to be performed in an independent agency that's non-existent in the captive world. So, those are the three things I think have been eye-openers for me. And everywhere there's a frustration, there's also an opportunity. And they've been opportunities because my feeling is we try to reach out to everybody in advance, even if we can't help them, and say, hey, we requote it with the companies we have available. We were not able to find you a better premium than where you are now, but we've already looked. We think if we hold on here one more year, maybe we can improve that position. So when you get a hold of those people in advance, whether through phone or by text or by email, whatever their preferred means of communication is, letting them know that you've already been working on their behalf without them having to ask, it just strengthens that relationship even more. And I think the opportunity to keep business on the books, I don't know long term. I see no reason why we won't be 95% long term on customer retention. There is, in my mind, no excuse for being under 95% in retention, as an independent agency, because if you reach out in advance, if you truly shop everything, 10%, that's the number we use, and reach out to the clients, let them know that you've shopped it or give them opportunities to better their position, and kind of consult with them and say, hey, we could save you a little bit of money, but we don't think it's worth it to jump, because the best thing I think is wait another year, and next year we'll have opportunities to save you an even greater amount of money due to longevity with the same carrier. So those are the three things I see, and those are kind of the frustrations and the opportunities that go along with it.
Okay, well, and that's insightful. Now, what I'd like to do, and it is because of our timing here, is, Ken, I'd like to actually flip that on you. Sorry, and ask you about some of the best components of the captive world, and then maybe some of what you like best about being an independent agent. Maybe the top three, if you could.
Yeah, and I think starting with the captive side, since the list is much shorter on the positive things, I think I had mentioned the provided leads and sources. With my particular captive, they already had certain like on-sites and things set up for you, that you would have a shot at some business with that, and then also that team behind you, also like with the name, but the service reps and all the things that can take care of that. And I know there's options for that in the independent side as well. We just haven't gotten to experience that quite yet. But yeah, that's pretty much it on the captive side. It was rough where we were at. You had to restart every year and things like that. It was a little tough. But as far as the independent, it has been really nice just having the best product for everyone, and also being able to write pretty much every risk. So that was a huge thing as a captive, is constantly turning away certain types of business just because you don't, it's just not in their appetite. So that's been excellent. And then also for me personally, and everybody on my team now, as well, is very well versed in the personal line side, but really don't have much commercial experience. So, Mike, who is part of the insurance connection over in Ohio. He's huge into the commercial, so I feel very confident being able to reach out to him and be like, hey, we have this risk, and that has been really nice to almost get a training, and to see how he works and things like that with the commercial side that we had absolutely no experience coming in with. So
great. Okay, so again, in the for the sake of time, if you will, I'm going to ask you both to briefly comment on the fact that you have joined an alliance or a network as part of becoming an independent agent. And for Keenan, that meant being part of Valley Insurance Agency Alliance based in Missouri. And Ken, as you were just alluding to, you're part of the Insurance Connection based in Ohio. Mm-hmm. But with or without consideration to SIAA in your respective master agencies, what difference, and I need you to be fairly brief about this, what difference has joining a network made in your agency's success? And Ken, why don't we start with you this time?
Okay, to keep it brief, it really has been everything. So we did a ton of research into our options and everything. And, coming from captive, you really don't actually have a book that anybody can, look at and, see how the business you write and all that. So you really can't get any direct appointments, that are at least good anyway, if you're just coming out. And you also don't have someone going to bat for you on commissions and bonuses, and, they don't have experience behind you. But when we, picked this aggregate, it was just, we were immediately appointed, 8-9 carriers, and we were off the bat, and coupled with the expanded commissions and bonus plan that we would not have received. It would have taken years and years to earn that. It really has been everything. Also with the commercial side too. That's been a big part of our business, and we didn't know how to do that before then. So
very good. Keenan, how about from your perspective?
Well, from our perspective is I know just because reaching out to a few different carriers, and even with the experience we had and the amount of business we controlled as individual captive agents, these companies really had no interest in talking to us. VIAA was the only way we had into the business. That was it. It's worked well. VIAA, I'm assuming, is as happy to have us as we are to have them. But just the access to the products, I do hear a lot of people complaining about, oh, you need to do it on your own. You need to do it on your own. Well, in our experience, we've received more in additional commissions and bonus commissions than what we were paying in our splits, or however you call the fees that, the SIAA, they charge. So it's been a wonderful experience to us. I will say that we have better access to more and better markets than the vast majority of independent agencies all over Southern Illinois where we operate. And the reason is because that relationship with SIAA and VIAA, and the fact that we are putting on a lot of new business onto the books, that we got to the point where carriers are coming to us and saying, hey, we want to appoint you. Do you have some interest in this? And, that's very different because, 2 years and just a few months ago, I was blowing people's phone up and they weren't even calling us back, didn't want to meet with us. So I don't know what it would look like or how it would look. I would say that could we have made it without something like that? Yeah, some way. But they've sped us up 10 years at least as far as the growth we've experienced and the opportunities we have. I can't imagine doing business without the VIAA and SIAA, support team behind us, really. So
gotcha. Good insight. Thank you. So, Tom, I want to ask you, because I know that you are in contact with a number of master agencies and agents across the land. And do you have any thoughts about the relative success of new independent agents who join a network as opposed to those who do not?
Well, Doug, I think I'd start. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm SIAA started the region in 1997, so 23 years here. But when you look at what we've been able to do for Ken and for Keenan, you look at SIA's growth, and I'll just use some examples here. 2018 was 797 million in business. 2019 was 961 million. This year, it's going to be very close to $1 billion in new business. And so for Ken and Keenan, what that means more accounts, the ability to write more business in your community. It means the ability to create more revenue because the commissions are higher. It's the ability to access some bonus commissions that, because of the leverage, the $9.3 billion in leverage that we have, we simply can negotiate better deals. But for the agent on the street, the silence is deafening when you step away from that captive agency world. It's scary. And so you need to think about the structure. You need to think about support. You need to think about, the foundation of the business you're trying to create and how that's going to work. And the fortunate thing about the aggregator model, if you will, is that, that gives you leverage and that gives you support. We're a little different than most, but, the leverage and the accelerating. I was a producer for 12 years, $1 million commission income producer for two very large agencies in North Carolina. And I've done this. And the reason I never started my own agency from scratch is because there wasn't anything like this that existed back in those days. And so, it's our ability to leverage and our ability to accelerate that puts these guys in a place that it would take them probably a decade to get to on their own. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay. So, gentlemen, I actually had a couple of more questions, but for the sake of time, I'm going to stop here. I hope that maybe all of you would consider coming back on and having some additional conversation on another episode. And I'd like to thank you all for sharing with our listeners. And our guests today, just as a reminder, have been Keenan Rice, owner of Eclipse Insurance based in DuQuoin, Illinois; Ken Schaub, owner of Firehouse Insurance in Cincinnati, Ohio; and Tom Barrett, president of SIAA Mid-America. And gentlemen, once again, thank you for joining us. I wish we had more time. I would like to thank our listeners for tuning into this episode of Insurance Agents Talk Shop. I'm Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA, and I hope our listeners will join us next time. To learn more about SIAA, the largest alliance of independent insurance agencies in the U.S., please visit SIAA.net. Once again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.